Hey everybody, we're going to talk a little bit about perspective today. And we're going to start with a nice, we could look at it as a fence or a wall. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide it into segments. So you can think of these segments as fence posts, or they could be panels, lines between the panels. Now notice what I've done here to find the center of this fence here. Make an X from corner to corner, cross in the middle, and there's your center. And then do the same thing with each of those segments. And then draw, depending on your taste, your fence posts or your cracks between your panels. And we'll do just a little more here. So what we're going to end up here with is a fence or a wall with several segments, each the same size, and with lines between them or fence posts between them, however you want to look at it. If we erase these guidelines and make these extra dark, we will see nice and evenly spaced. Now I could have just used the ruler and measured, but I'm going to do it this way and you'll find out shortly. Alright, so now that I've got my wall, looks nice enough, but in reality, how often do you look at a wall straight on like that? Unless you're drawing a Charlie Brown cartoon and Linus and Charlie Brown are sitting on the top of the wall talking, you're not going to see that in real life very often. So in reality, and aside from that, making a much more interesting picture, is having a wall or a fence that we are viewing at an angle. So of course, if you are looking at something at an angle, the end that is closer to you is going to appear larger than the end that is further away. So that is called perspective. So what we'll do now is we'll adjust our fence, adjust it for the proper perspective. And now that I've erased my guidelines, pretty much, here's my wall. It's bigger on this end than this end, so perspective. Now, if you have an eye for this kind of thing at all, you'll see that this really doesn't look right. You have these skinny panels here, and these big fat ones here, so that's not right. And I see a lot of artists, I hesitate to say bad artists because I'm a pretty crappy artist, but I see a lot of kids when they draw something like this, or they draw a sidewalk, or they draw railroad tracks. They draw their lines, and then their edges, and then they have their rails nice and evenly spaced. So 1 inch apart or whatever it is. But that's not really, it doesn't match what a photograph of a railroad or a wall is going to look like. So let's try a better way. So here we've got a wall and it's angled and we have nice perspective here. This end's closer than this end. And let's say that we have a fence post here. And we'll have another fence post here. Alright. Now, let's find the midpoint between these two fence posts. Same way we did with our straight wall or fence. But this time, instead of going from here to here, we're going to go from this corner to this corner. So from each fence post to the other. And we'll draw a fence post there. And then we're going to find another midpoint. And we'll put our additional posts here. So I've continued this process finding the midpoints. This could be telephone poles. This is more accurate perspective. Okay, so we have spaced far apart here, closer and closer as we get further away. And you can look at it this way, a sidewalk or railroad track, same thing, perspective works like that. Now, if we were to continue these two lines, they're not parallel, so at some point over in this direction, they are going to intersect, and that point where the lines intersect is called the vanishing point. And what exactly is the vanishing point? Well, the vanishing point, like I said, is where the lines of perspective meet. And here I've drawn a nice horizon, and you could put the vanishing point in the middle, but you don't have to. The vanishing point could be here or here. It could even be off of the horizon on the sky or down here, anywhere. The vanishing point can be anywhere in your field of view, but I know some people love having the vanishing point in the middle, so let's put our vanishing point in the middle. And now we're going to draw perspective lines, and I think we're going to draw what we're going to consider, we're going to call them telephone poles. You can hear my dogs barking because that's all they do ever. Here's what we're starting with. So we have to find the midpoint between these lines of perspective. So we're going to imagine there's a telephone pole on the edge here. The next one, we're going to put it right between the edge and the vanishing point. And there it is. Continue finding centers, midpoints. Our next pole like that. And I continue drawing poles closer and closer. And I'm going to eyeball the next couple. There's going to be one here. And then halfway between there is going to be here. And notice each of these telephone poles is getting closer and closer to the vanishing point. But because I'm going halfway between each time, and halfway between, and halfway between, it's never going to reach this vanishing point. Now, there's a common misconception that the vanishing point is some magical spot where once you reach that, you can't see any further, but that is not true, because in reality, these telephone poles could reach infinitely, but they'll never reach that vanishing point. They'll keep getting closer and closer and closer, but never actually meet it. Now, they will become too small for you to see. You know, I mean, if I had the smallest possible pencil and a magnifying glass, I could keep going, get it really small, but you wouldn't be able to see it. But if you had a microscope or a magnifying glass, or if this were real life, if you had a telescope, you could zoom in and you could see it. You'd be able to see as far as you want. Now, there is a point where it's too small for the human eye to see. There's an urban legend floating around that the reason you can't see things at the close to the vanishing point is there isn't enough light to reach your eyes. Well, then you get a flashlight. You know, if you were this far out to sea, or out on a flat plane or whatever, you turn on a flashlight, and even in the daytime, or a laser, or even a candle, you'd be able to see it. And something very bright, like, for example, the sun, or a star, if it were very far away, you would be able to see it because of the bright light. But the idea that things actually disappear at the vanishing point, that is false. That's not true. And the fact that it's called a vanishing point, that doesn't make it any more true. Some people call it the point of convergence because they converge there. But that doesn't make any difference either. It just gets closer and closer and closer to the vanishing point or the point of convergence, but it never actually meets. So I've inked them and I've erased my guidelines, and you have a row of very crudely drawn telephone poles reaching off into the distance, getting closer and closer together, but never actually intersecting with the vanishing point. There is no magical point 20 miles away or whatever beyond which nothing can be seen. If these telephone poles were bigger, you could see them even more clearly further away. That's how perspective works. Nothing disappears. Now, I've also heard it said that perspective only works on a flat two-dimensional plane. Well, that's ridiculous. The rules of perspective work no matter where you're looking at it. Okay, so let's say we're going to put a vanishing point up here. Okay, so now I've added some perspective lines here. The vanishing point there. So we're going to do like we've been doing. We're going to find the midpoint there, and so on. So again, we've got these lines getting closer and closer and closer, always by half, always cutting that distance in half, but never reaching the vanishing point. Okay, what are these lines? Well, they could be, I don't know, you could have a row of telephone poles or a fence going up into space, into infinity, but you could also have, say, a ball. Maybe someone's throwing a ball up into the air, and they're throwing it really hard, so it just keeps going forever and ever out into space. Like that. So there we've got our ball getting thrown out into space, further and further and further and further, infinitely, as far as we want, but never reaching the vanishing point, getting closer and closer and closer, but never actually touching it. And it could be 20 miles, it could be 100 miles, could be 1,000,000 miles. This could be the planet Jupiter, which is 365 million miles away, but you can see it not only with the telescope, but with the naked eye, because it brightly reflects the light of the sun. On the right day of the year, you can look up and find Jupiter real easily. You just get a star chart and there it is. So there's no 20-mile vanishing point where things just disappear. I'll have more to say later, but for now that's it. Thanks, bye.